Will US President Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal hold unconsidered side effects for the US and its friends and allies around the world? His hard-nosed action to reimpose sanctions on Iran and to impose further sanctions on foreign companies doing business with Iran has plunged Tehran's economic future into meltdown. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the sting of sanctions will only grow more painful if the regime does not change course from the unacceptable and unproductive path it has chosen for itself and the people of Iran, adding a warning, these will be the strongest sanctions in history by the time we are done. Pompeo's demands include tighter restrictions on Obama's nuclear agreement, the release of US citizens held in Iran, an end to Tehran's support of Middle Eastern terrorist and militia groups to stop infringing Iraq's sovereignty, and a total withdrawal from Syria. US-based Quartz Media reveals EU trade with Iran increased from €7.7 billion, $9.1 billion in 2015, to €21 billion last year. The European Union, a supposed US ally, is Iran's third largest trading partner, after China and the United Arab Emirates. Every EU nation has increased their trade with Iran, with the exception of Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. Italy, the largest EU-Iran trading partner, released figures of a €5.1 billion imports and exports, and recently agreed a €5 billion credit deal to support Italian companies wanting to invest in Iran. Quartz Media further stated, since the sanctions were lifted, the European country to boost trade most aggressively with Iran, relatively speaking, is Greece. In the past 2 years, trade between the countries increased by a whopping 3,500%, as Greece went from Iran's 19th largest trading partner in the EU to its 6th. Hellenic Petroleum, Greece's largest oil refiner, said in 2016 they would start buying crude oil from Iran. Hellenic now buy 22% of their oil from Iran and Iraq, and they have paid Iran several €100 million to settle accounts unpaid when sanctions were invoked in 2012. Trump's unilateral decision has created chaos for EU and many other world businesses. He has given EU companies 180 days to arrange their affairs, and as US-EU trade is worth $700 billion, they are unlikely to risk antagonizing Trump. However, European losses will be substantial. France's Economy Minister Bruno Le Maire has suggested EU compensation for businesses hit by the US sanction policy to allow current deals entered into with Iran to continue, though this would be an extremely expensive option. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said, with the withdrawal of America, Iran's expectations from the European Union have increased in order to maintain the deal's gains, and in the current context, the European political support for the accord is not sufficient. Trump's rejection of the Iran deal also affects US companies too, as the Financial Times reports. Airbus and Boeing, the US aircraft manufacturer, would be two other potential losers if they are forced to cancel scores of Iranian orders. Any delay in deliveries would be a serious blow to Iran. Tehran has said it needs 500 new passenger jets to renew the country's fleet, some of which predates the 1979 revolution. Since then, air disasters have cost about 1,200 Iranian lives. With the removal of the EU from Iranian trade and commerce, will China take centre stage? The Financial Times again. In particular, Beijing stands to benefit if Total is forced to pull out of its showpiece $4.8 billion expansion of Iran's South Pars gas field, a project in which Chinese state-controlled CNPC has a 30% stake. According to people with knowledge of the project, if Total withdrew, CNPC would take over the French group's stake, provided that the Chinese company was itself able to avoid sanctions. Total declined to comment. For Iran, the option of Chinese investment is not guaranteed. China is not impervious to Trump's stand on Iran. Washington has recently imposed a 7-year ban on Chinese telecommunications firm ZTE buying US equipment after it was found to have violated US restriction on exports to North Korea and Iran. Further direct trade restriction for Chinese companies must represent a reality China would be reluctant to test. As a further impending sanction, the US has said it could bar the use of the US dollar, which former US Treasury official David Cohen described as a death penalty for any international bank. The potential ramifications probably go way beyond anything Donald Trump could envisage. His decision launches a new era in US-Iranian relations, where Iran's continued expansion of influence in the Middle East uncompromisingly challenged.